The sterile white of the envelope felt like ice against my fingertips. Inside, a single DNA report erased 18 years of my life and confirmed the one unsettling truth I'd always felt deep down. I didn't belong. The Ramsey family study, with its mahogany walls and the scent of old leather and lemon polish, had always been my sanctuary. It was the heart of our family's high-end furniture empire, a place of calm logic in a house filled with artistic chaos. But today, the silence was a suffocating blanket. My mother, Eleanor, clutched a silk handkerchief, her knuckles white. My father, Richard, stood by the window, his usual commanding posture softened by a new, unfamiliar sorrow. Between them on the polished desk lay a single, sterile white envelope. Inside, a DNA report erased 18 years of my life and confirmed the one unsettling truth I'd always felt deep down. I didn't belong. A quiet, rational part of my brain wasn't even surprised. It made a strange kind of sense. My older brothers, Leo and Ethan, were brilliant in their own ways. Leo could make a grand piano weep with a single touch, and Ethan lived for the thrill of a racetrack. They were artists, dreamers who thought in melodies and adrenaline. Their greatest concern was how to make money. My greatest concern was how to make it. I was the one who balanced the household accounts, who tutored my classmates for cash in high school, who helped Dad review business proposals. He'd often sling an arm around my shoulder, his voice booming with pride. "A lion doesn't give birth to a dog, Chloe." He'd say it while looking pointedly at my brothers, who would just shrug, unbothered. "Hey, it's a good thing," Leo would always say, ruffling my hair. "This whole empire plus these two useless older brothers are all yours to inherit, little sis." Now the truth hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. I was not a Ramsey. The real heiress, a girl named Kaitlyn, who had spent 18 years in the foster care system, had been sound. The first to shatter weren't my parents, but my brothers. The moment the words were official, they collapsed. Not figuratively, literally. Leo, the dramatic pianist, grabbed my right leg. Ethan, the reckless driver, clung to my left. "Chloe, you can't go," Leo wailed, his voice cracking. "If you leave, who's going to save me from business school? Dad's serious this time." Ethan's eyes were red-rimmed. "He is. And who's going to help me with my sponsorship contracts? Chloe, I just want to race cars." Standing awkwardly by the door was Kaitlyn. She was pale and thin, her posture rigid, her eyes holding a deep, defensive chill as she watched the chaotic scene. I took a deep breath, dragging the dead weight of my 6-foot-tall brothers across the Persian rug. With a final heave, I deposited them at Kaitlyn's feet. "There," I said, my voice steady. "Kaitlyn, from now on, these two are your responsibility." The sight sent my mother into a fresh wave of quiet, heart-wrenching sobs. Her tears were my only weakness in this house. She rushed to me, her hands cold as they gripped mine. "Chloe, darling, the Ramseys can afford to raise one more daughter. Please don't leave." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Mom," I said gently, "Kaitlyn is 18. She's lived a life that should have been mine, a life of hardship. The fault lies with me. I've been living her life for 18 years. If I stay, my conscience will never be clear." My brothers looked at Kaitlyn, a flicker of resentment in their eyes. I sighed and pulled all three of them in front of the grand gold-leafed mirror in the hallway. "Look," I said sternly, "just look at the three of you. You have the same eyes, the same jawline. Stop this nonsense right now. Don't make your parents and your real sister sad." That did it. Ethan broke first, burying his face in his hands. "But if you go, who will do my homework?" he mumbled, thankfully too quiet for anyone else to hear. Leo just sighed, looking like a puppy abandoned in the rain. I guess we should let her go, Ethan. She's not our real sister anymore. She won't take care of us." His words, meant to be tragic, just made me sound like their traitorous governess. Kaitlyn, watching this bizarre display, took a step back, her face a cold mask. "I get it. I'm the extra one here. I can leave. I'm used to being an orphan. You don't have to put on the show for me." Before anyone could react, I stepped in front of her. "Don't say that, Kaitlyn. This is my fault. We should have returned to our rightful places long ago." Then, without another word, I turned and walked upstairs, not giving my brothers a chance to grab my ankles again. I pulled my old suitcase from the back of the closet. Inside went a few non-designer outfits and my toiletries. The only other thing I owned was a bank card, holding the money I'd earned myself over the years from side hustles. When I came down, Dad was standing at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes red. "That's not enough money, Chloe," he choked out. How is that enough? Let me transfer you. Let me give you 20,000. Kaitlyn let out a cold little scoff from the corner. When I was out there, I didn't even have $20 to my name. Dad fell silent. My brother started to protest, but I held up a hand. It's okay. I have my hands and my feet. I can earn my own money. I turned to my parents, the two people who had raised me with nothing but love. I couldn't kneel. It wasn't our way, but I gave them a deep, formal nod of respect. Thank you for 18 years of love and care. If I end up broke and on the street, I won't come to the Ramsey house for a dime. But if I succeed, I promise I will be there to support you in your old age. Anyone can say nice words, so fake. I understood her bitterness. If I were in her shoes, I might feel the same. So I didn't linger. I turned, walked out of the mansion, and didn't look back. The fortune I had saved was just over $12,000. It had to last me through 4 years of college, cover my living expenses, and maybe, just maybe, be the seed money for my own future. I couldn't afford to waste a single dollar. My new life had begun. Leaving the Ramsey mansion was like stepping off a cliff into thin air. My new home was a third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that smelled perpetually of damp pavement and fried onions. The rent for a shared room was $800 a month, a price that felt both exorbitant and mercifully cheap. The flickering fluorescent light in the hallway cast long dancing shadows, and I was sure I heard mice celebrating my arrival in the walls. It was a far cry from my soundproofed, temperature-controlled bedroom, but it was mine. At least, half of it was. During the day, I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. I was a whirlwind of activity. I washed dishes at a greasy spoon diner, the smell of burnt coffee clinging to my hair. I delivered food on a rickety second-hand bike, my legs burning with the effort. I even took the job handing out flyers for a new gym, a task so mind-numbingly slow it made dishwashing feel like an extreme sport. But every dollar I earned felt heavier and more real than any allowance I'd ever received. I'd assumed the first person from my old life to track me down would be Ethan, probably after he'd run out of clean socks. I was wrong. The first was Julian Vance, my now ex-fiancé. He found me on the stoop of my building, looking as out of place as a prize-winning orchid in a patch of weeds. He stood beside his gleaming black Porsche, his expression like that of a kicked puppy. "Chloe, you're my fiancé. How could you be sharing a room with another man?" I looked at his 6'1" frame, the sharp haircut, the aura of aggressive wealth that surrounded him, and I had to stifle a laugh. "Sorry to have troubled you, Julian." "Troubled me? Chloe, you broke my heart. I've had enough." I grabbed his arm, surprised by my own strength, and pulled him into the dim, narrow hallway of my building before he could cause a scene. I pressed a finger to his lips. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" I hissed. Julian's lower lip jutted out. "You yelled at me," he whispered, his eyes welling up. "For some stranger, you yelled at me."
"He's not a stranger, you idiot. He's my roommate." Julian's eyes, bright and impossibly blue, widened. "Room-mate? What does that mean?" I took a deep, calming breath. "It means," I said, articulating each word as if speaking to a child, "we rent a house together." He looked genuinely baffled. "People can rent a house like that?" I rolled my eyes. This was a classic let them eat cake moment. "What I do and how I live is none of your business anymore, Julian." He finally deployed the waterworks, covering his face with his hands and letting out a soft sob. "How is it not my business? I'm your fiancé." "Was," I corrected, holding up my hand to stop the performance. "Kaitlyn and I were switched at birth. She is your intended. The arrangement was between the Ramsey and Vance families." He waved my logic away, pulling a sleek metallic credit card from his wallet and pressing it into my hand. "I don't care about any of that. I only recognize you, Chloe. Fake heiress or real heiress, the one I love is you." I had always seen Julian as a younger brother. Our engagement was a family duty I had accepted because it benefited the Ramseys. It was a merger, not a romance. Now that I was no longer a Ramsey, I couldn't in good conscience cling to this connection, leeching benefits from two powerful families. It took another 15 minutes of firm rejection to finally get him to leave, and I slumped against my apartment door, physically and emotionally drained. Just then, a savory aroma, rich and complex, snaked its way into the hallway from the shared kitchen. If I wasn't mistaken, it was the deep, comforting smell of braised short ribs. My stomach growled, a loud, embarrassing rumble. I hadn't had a decent meal since leaving the mansion. Tiptoeing into the kitchen, I saw him, my roommate, Alex Thorne. He had a buzz cut and a tall, lean frame. The muscles in his forearms, etched with faint blue veins, flexed as he expertly stirred the contents of a heavy pot. I was captivated. The food, I mean. Definitely the food. I peeked my head around the doorframe, putting on my most charming smile. "Hey, handsome, room for a negotiation?" He shot me a single, dismissive glance. I immediately changed my tone, adopting a more respectful, businesslike approach. "Alex, Mr. Thorne, sir, could I perhaps purchase a few of those ribs?" His cold expression didn't change, but he seemed to register my desperation. "I could pay," I added quickly. The word pay seemed to be the magic password. The frost in his eyes thawed by a degree. Without a word, he fished out two of the less perfect pieces of meat and dropped them unceremoniously into a bowl I was holding. $10. The price was steep for a simple meal, but the aroma was worth every cent. I told myself I was succumbing to fine cuisine, not a fine-looking man. And from that day on, an unspoken agreement formed between us. I bought the groceries, he did the cooking. It was the best deal I ever made. Life with Alex Barn settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm, though it was a rhythm of constant motion. I learned more about him through observation than conversation. He was gone before the sun rose and often returned long after I had fallen asleep over my college textbooks. I'd find the traces of his existence in the morning. A clean coffee mug by the sink, the faint scent of soap from his shower. I found out later, through a hospital bill I accidentally saw on the kitchen table, that he had a younger brother, Theo, who was in long-term care. Alex wasn't just working hard. He was fighting a war against time and medical expenses, and he was even more desperate for money than I was. One morning, the quiet was wrong. Usually, I'd hear the floorboards creak as he left around 5 a.m., but when I woke up at 7, the apartment was still. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. After knocking on his door with no response, I pushed it open. The sight made my breath catch. He was lying on his mattress, half uncovered, his torso a canvas of angry purple and blue bruises. When I got closer, I felt the heat radiating from his skin. His breath was shallow, and he was muttering deliriously. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. The first thing he said when he woke up in the stark, white emergency room wasn't "thank you." It was a hoarse, panicked accusation. "Why did you bring me here?" "Because you would have cooked to death in that room if I hadn't," I snapped, my fear turning to anger. "The doctor said you have a concussion and a dangerously high fever." The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a soul-deep weariness. He sank back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. It was a question of a man who couldn't even afford to be sick. "How much is this going to cost?" he whispered. "How did you get these injuries?" I asked, my voice softer now. The doctor had been clear. He was beaten. A bitter, humorless smile touched his lips. "Some drunk rich kid thought I looked at him the wrong way. Picked a fight. His friends gave me $5,000 to make it go away." My brow furrowed. I couldn't bring myself to ask why he didn't call the police. I already knew the answer. $5,000 was 2, maybe 3 months of his brother's hospital bills. It was survival. Looking at him lying there, so utterly defeated, I knew my flyer distribution money wasn't going to cut it. I needed help, real help. My pride warred with my practicality, but looking at Alex's bruised face, pride lost. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't dared to call. Then I pressed the button. The phone was picked up on the first ring. "Chloe Ramsey!" a voice shrieked so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You are so dead, cutting me off? Me? Do you have a death wish?" It was Maya Sung, daughter of the CEO of Starlight Pictures, and my best, most terrifyingly loyal friend. I winced. "Maya, listen, it's different now. I'm not a Ramsey anymore. I was afraid. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. When I got back to the apartment, a designer handbag flew past my head and hit the wall with a soft thud. Maya stood in the doorway, her face a storm of anger and unshed tears. Behind her, looking miserable, was Jillian. "Don't you dare give me that 'it's different now' garbage," Maya yelled, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "Friendship isn't about status. I can't believe you cold-hearted, blockheaded—" Julian, ever the drama king, rushed forward. "Maya, don't yell at her. Can't you see she's suffering?" "Who said the Ramseys don't want her?" a familiar voice boomed. My head snapped up. It was Leo, my former older brother, dressed impeccably and looking horrified at the state of my hallway. "Even if our parents didn't, we'd never abandon Chloe," another voice chimed in, and there was Ethan, standing right behind him. Maya rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Oh great, the Ramsey circus is in town. Leo ignored her and grabbed my hand. "Chloe, come home. My solo recital is next month. I saved you the best seat." Ethan pushed him aside. "Back off. Family ties are forever. You get that?" he said, glaring at Maya. Maya shoved him back. "Family ties? Where were your family ties when you let her live in this shoebox?" Just as Ethan was about to retort, Julian stepped between them, his expression tragically earnest. "She is my fiancé. Naturally, she should be returning to the Vance estate." The tiny hallway descended into chaos. 4 people, 3 different factions, all yelling over each other. I took a deep breath, ready to scream, and stepped into the middle of the fray. "Enough, all of you. Leo, Ethan, I love you both," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "But my decision is final. If I go back, I will always be taking something that belongs to Kaitlyn. She's been alone for 18 years. She needs you more than I do right now. Don't make her feel unwelcome." I saw the understanding, however reluctant, dawn on their faces. Then I faced Julian. I stepped closer, speaking just to him. "Julian, I never wanted to mislead you. I've always seen you as a brother. My acceptance of our engagement was a duty to the Ramsey family. That duty is over. You are a good person, and you deserve someone who loves you completely, not someone who sees you as an obligation." His face crumpled, and for the first time the tears looked real. He didn't cry loudly, but a single tear traced a path down his cheek. "Okay, Chloe," he whispered. Leo and Ethan, seeing their moment, stepped in. "Come on, man," Leo said, slinging an arm around Julian's shoulders. "Let's go get a drink, or 10. They half-giggled, half-dragged the heartbroken billionaire out of my hallway. Finally, I looked at Maya. Her anger had subsided, replaced by a deep, familiar hurt. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I should have called. I was just trying to prove I could do it alone." She pulled me into a fierce hug. "Don't you ever do that again," she mumbled into my shoulder. "I don't care what your last name is. You're my person." Her eyes flickered toward Alex, who had been standing silently in his doorway the entire time, an invisible spectator to the drama. Her gaze was sharp and assessing. "We'll talk tomorrow," she said, giving my hand a final squeeze before leaving. The silence that descended on the apartment was deafening. The storm had passed. I noticed Alex from the corner of my eye, a faint shadow in the dim light. He had seen everything. He looked down at the floor, then quietly turned to go back into his room. "Wait," I called. He stopped. "I was going to make some instant noodles. Want some?" He turned back, a ghost of a smile on his face. "I think we can do better than that." A short while later, we were sitting at the tiny kitchen table with 2 cheap beers and a plate of scrambled eggs he'd whipped up. The air was still thick with the echoes of the earlier chaos. I watched him, noticing how he seemed to fold into himself, making himself smaller. "So," I began, deciding to just rip the Band-Aid off, "I have a job proposition for you." He looked up, surprised. "A job?" "My friend, Maya. Her family owns Starlight Pictures. They're always looking for new talent. For commercials, modeling, maybe more. You have the look. I don't know if you can act, but we can find out. It pays well." He stared into his beer bottle, tracing the label with his thumb. "Thanks," he said, but his voice was flat. "What's wrong?" I pressed gently. "You don't want it?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he let out a short, self-deprecating laugh.
When they were all here, your brothers, your ex-fiancé, all fighting over you, I I was jealous. I blinked, confused. Jealous of what? The drama? Trust me, you don't want it. No, he said, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes held a deep, profound sadness that seemed ancient. My parents both remarried. They didn't want us, my brother and me. We were burdens from their past lives. So I raised him. Then he got sick. He's the only family I have. But sometimes I get so tired. The admission hung in the air between us. Suddenly, I understood. I understood the relentless drive, the desperation for money, the armor he wore so well. Finally, it showed its cracks. A wave of empathy washed over me, so strong it felt like my own sorrow. I was an orphan by circumstance. He was an orphan by choice, his parents' choice. My eyes stung. I reached across the table and gently patted his arm. "It's okay," I said softly. "Things are getting better now, right?" He looked at my hand on his arm and then back at me. A flicker of something fragile and hopeful passed through his eyes. Maybe he was right. Maybe things were finally getting better for both of us. True to her word, Maya arranged a screen test for Alex at Starlight Pictures. He was a natural. His quiet intensity, which I had mistaken for mere shyness, translated into a powerful, magnetic presence on camera. He booked a national commercial within a week. The day he got the news, he came home with a small, perfect cheesecake and a smile that reached his eyes for the first time since I'd met him. As summer faded into fall, it was time for college move-in day. Pulling my single suitcase across the manicured campus quad, I saw them. The entire Ramsey clan was gathered around Kaitlyn's dorm building. Eleanor was fussing over her blankets, Richard was giving her a tearful talk, and Leo and Ethan were wrestling with a mountain of boxes. Kaitlyn stood in the middle of it all, dressed in a delicate designer dress, looking like a swan queen holding court. They were a picture of a perfect, loving family. A familiar ache, jealousy, loneliness, regret pricked at my heart. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. "If you stare, it'll just make you feel worse," a low voice said. It was Alex. I turned to see him standing behind me, his expression gentle. He didn't say anything else. He just unwrapped a lollipop he'd produced from his pocket and popped it into my mouth. The sweet cherry flavor was a childish, perfect distraction. "Being sad doesn't help our bottom line, does it?" I mumbled around the candy. A rare, genuine grin spread across his face. "Maybe not, but I know a Chloe Ramsey who can conquer the world whether she's happy or sad."
His faith in me was a better motivator than any business plan. I found an opportunity faster than I expected. The yogurt bar on campus was bland and overpriced. I knew I could do better. Using the kitchen in Alex's new, slightly bigger apartment, an upgrade thanks to his commercial money, I started my own business, Chloe's Creations, a delivery-only service for custom Greek yogurt bowls with fresh fruit. My first and only employee was Theo, Alex's younger brother. His condition had stabilized enough for him to be discharged, and he was a natural salesman. Zipping around campus in his motorized wheelchair, which we decorated with my logo, he became a campus celebrity. The yogurt zipper, they called him. Business boomed. By the end of the first semester, I had cleared nearly $10,000 in profit. To celebrate, I splurged on ingredients for a feast. In the kitchen, as Alex was expertly chopping vegetables, I cornered him, full of playful confidence. I poked him in the ribs. "Admit it, you're impressed." He laughed, dodging my attack, and in one smooth motion spun me around to steady me. My hands landed flat against his chest. I could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart. The playful energy between us shifted, thickening into something charged and serious. I knew in that moment that my feelings for him ran deeper than just friendship or gratitude. I stood on my toes, and he leaned down, his eyes dark and focused. Our lips were inches apart when the door flew open. "Bro, is dinner ready yet?" Theo yelled, rolling into the kitchen. He froze, taking in the scene. "Oh, oops." He covered his eyes with one hand and fumbled to turn his chair around. "My bad. Super slow wheelchair today. Pretend I was never here." The spell was broken. We finished cooking in a slightly awkward silence. Later that night, after Alex had taken Theo back to his dorm, he found me on the balcony. "Chloe," he started, his voice heavy. What I feel for you, it's not just gratitude. He looked out at the city lights, his profile etched against the darkness. You and your brother, you lit up my whole world. You showed me that life didn't have to be a dead-end street. But he finally turned to me, his expression vulnerable. I see your family, and I know I can't compete. I'm afraid I'm not good enough for you. I stepped into his space, my heart aching for him. Alex Thorne, I said softly, my life was built on a lie. My family is a beautiful, chaotic mess. You are one of the most real, most solid people I have ever met. You are more than good enough. The last of his reservations seemed to melt away. He pulled me into his arms, and this time there were no interruptions. My birthday was a spectacle only Maya sung to orchestrate. She rented out a glamorous lounge, complete with a fleet of male models hired to greet me with, "Happy birthday, boss lady!" Alex and Thea were by my side, looking slightly overwhelmed. Then the Ramseys arrived, all of them. My heart leapt into my throat. "We're not here to drag you home," my father said quickly, seeing my expression. "We're here to celebrate you." Before I could process that, my brothers cornered me. "Chloe, you have to come back," Leo pleaded. "Dad made me an intern. I accidentally shredded the annual profit report." "And I invested $1 million he gave me," Kaitlyn added, popping up beside them. Her face was sheepish. "The good news is I didn't lose all of it. The bad news is there's only $100,000 left." Ethan nodded grimly. "Dad said if you don't come back to run the company, he's sending all three of us to a business boot camp in Alaska." Kaitlyn suddenly grabbed my arm, her eyes shining with earnestness. "Please, Chloe, you take the company. I just want to paint. You take the company." She gave me a sly grin. "Besides, I like having you as a big sister." Looking at their hopeful, desperate faces, I burst out laughing. My two families, the one I was born into and the one I had chosen, were colliding in the most ridiculous, wonderful way. Later that night, after the party, Alex was quiet again. "You're going back," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said, "but not without you." I took his hand. "My name might be Ramsey again, but my heart is with a Thorne. You're my partner, Alex, in business and in life. We build this empire together." He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair, and I felt his whole body relax. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, partner." 3 years later, the headline in Forbes read, "From Imposter to Innovator, How Chloe Ramsey Revolutionized Her Family's Empire." I smiled, closing the magazine as my private jet began its descent into Los Angeles. Down below, a billboard for the summer's biggest blockbuster featured a striking, handsome face, my handsome face. Alex won his first major acting award that year. In his speech, he didn't thank the Academy first. He looked straight into the camera, and it felt like he was speaking only to me. "To Chloe, you are my light in the darkness. This is for you." Our wedding was a chaotic, joyous affair. Leo played the processional, a beautiful piece he's composed himself. His wife Maya, a shocking development no one saw coming, cried through the entire ceremony. Ethan was Alex's best man, and Theo, now walking with the aid of a cane, was my man of honor. And next to me, as my maid of honor, stood Kaitlyn. Her first solo art exhibition, which I had funded, had sold out in a single night. She was a rising star. As we stood there, she leaned over and whispered, "You know, for an imposter, you turned out to be a pretty great sister." I squeezed her hand, looking out at our wild, wonderful, blended family. "Likewise," I whispered back. Alex took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "Ready, Mrs. Thorne Ramsey?" he murmured, his eyes full of a love that was deeper and more real than any fortune. I smiled. "I've been ready for a long time."